For most of human history, the most valuable substance on earth wasn't gold, silver, or land, it was flavor. A handful of dried seeds, a pinch of bark, a drop of resin, these tiny ingredients once held the power to shape empires. It sounds unbelievable today, in a world where spices sit neatly on supermarket shelves. But for nearly 1,000 years, peppercorns were worth more than gold. Nutmeg could purchase a house. Cinnamon could erase a lifetime of debt. Nations killed, conquered, and gambled everything simply to control where these flavors came from. Welcome to the Financial Historian, where money, power, and history collide, and nothing is ever as simple as it seems. Before modern nations, before stock exchanges, before oil pipelines, the economy ran on spices. They didn't just enhance taste, they solved problems people had no other way to solve. Spices preserved meat, disinfected wounds, masked rot, treated illnesses, and signaled wealth in a world defined by scarcity. In medieval Europe, a dish scented with cinnamon or cloves wasn't merely food. It was a declaration of privilege, a momentary escape from the monotony of survival. Spices weren't luxuries. They were magic. And because of that, they became money. They became power. Picture Europe in the 12th century, cold, gray, isolated, and profoundly bland. Most people never traveled more than a few miles from home. Diets were repetitive. Winters were brutal. Fresh food was rare, preserved food tasted like damp cellars, and life was endlessly predictable. Yet nobles feasted on exotic spices sourced from lands they would never see, carried by traders who crossed oceans, deserts, and mountains. A pound of pepper could buy livestock. A pouch of saffron could be traded for weapons. These were not indulgences. They were assets, and Europe wanted more. But acquiring spices meant navigating one of the most sophisticated, secretive, and profitable supply chains the world had ever seen. Spices didn't grow in Europe. They came from the Malabar coast of India, the Banda Islands of Indonesia, the mountains of Sri Lanka, and the forests of Southeast Asia. They traveled through complex layers of merchants. Indian traders to Arab intermediaries to Egyptian ports, and Egyptian ports to Venetian ships. Each group added its markup. Each link guarded its secrets. The farther spices traveled, the more myths merchants invented to protect their roots. Medieval Europeans were told cinnamon grew in giant bird nests guarded by monsters. Nutmeg came from islands surrounded by dragons, and peppercorns were scorched black when farmers burned deadly forests. These tales weren't folklore, they were marketing, designed to maintain monopoly. At the end of this chain stood Venice, the unlikely financial heart of medieval Europe. Venice didn't grow spices, but it controlled the entry point into Europe. By the 13th century, it had built an almost total monopoly on importing pepper and other high-value spices. Venetian merchants manipulated scarcity, hoarded supply, and released shipments only when prices peaked. Spice wealth transformed Venice into a shining city of marble palaces and vast naval power. It became the first European state to grow rich not through land, but through logistics, through controlling flows rather than fields, a model modern corporations still follow. But with dominance came desperation. The more Venice tightened its grip, the more Europeans searched for alternatives. And this is where our story shifts west toward the Atlantic, toward the unknown, toward the lands that would become the Americas. Not because Europe wanted new continents, not because explorers craved adventure. Europe sailed west for one reason, to break the spice monopoly. Columbus didn't seek a new world, he believed he could reach Asia, the land of pepper, faster by sailing west. He was wrong, but his mistake remade history. Vasco da Gama sailed around Africa not to explore, but to bypass Arab middlemen. Magellan circumnavigated the globe because Spain needed its own route to the Spice Islands. Every expedition that sparked the age of exploration began as a financial maneuver to secure cheaper spices. Empire followed profit, geography followed greed. But when Europeans reached the Americas, something unexpected happened. They discovered a second wave of spices, new, powerful, transformative. Chili peppers, unknown in Asia before 1492, spread across the Eastern Hemisphere in decades, reshaping Indian curries, Sichuan cuisine, and Korean flavors. Vanilla became one of Europe's most prized ingredients. Cacao, once used as currency in Aztec markets, became a luxury drink for European elites. Allspice, grown only in Jamaica and Central America, became a key preservative and medical ingredient. The New World was no longer a curiosity. It became a new economic engine, a second spice frontier. Its arrival reshaped global trade and marked the true beginning of globalization. But to understand the impact of American spices, we must rewind to the world they disrupted. Before chili peppers remade Asia, before vanilla conquered Europe, the global economy was already dominated by the medieval spice route, the first truly global supply chain. Farmers earned pennies, middlemen earned fortunes. By the time pepper reached a banquet table in London or Paris, its price had multiplied 100-fold. It was an early and striking example of value extraction. Power in this system came from choke points, narrow straits, ports, islands, and trade corridors where a single group could control the flow of wealth. Arab merchants mastered the monsoon winds in ports of Aden, Hormuz, and Jeddah. Venice controlled the Adriatic and secured exclusive rights with Egypt. Size didn't matter. Position did. Like every monopoly, the spice system eventually created incentives for bypass. The higher Venice pushed prices, the more Europe sought alternatives. In the 1400s, that pressure ignited action. Portugal moved first. Its princes weren't interested in exploration for glory, they wanted pepper, the single most profitable spice in medieval commerce. If Portugal could cut out Venice and reach India directly, it could reshape global power. Vasco da Gama's voyage around Africa was a technological leap disguised as exploration. When he reached Calicut in 1498, he discovered something shocking. Spices weren't guarded by dragons, they were plentiful, cheap, and openly traded. The myth of scarcity existed only in Europe. Portugal responded not with humility, but with force blockading ports, raiding ships, and imposing harsh taxes across the Indian Ocean. Its fortresses from East Africa to India turned ancient trade routes into militarized corridors. But Portugal was small, and a new challenger was rising, the Dutch. In the 1600s, the Dutch Republic was a tiny nation with enormous ambition. To capture the spice trade, they created something the world had never seen: the VOC, the Dutch East India Company. It was the first multinational corporation with state-like powers. It could wage war, sign treaties, mint coins, and govern territories. Its mission was simple: monopolize everything. The VOC seized the Banda Islands, the world's only source of nutmeg. They massacred local populations, enslaved survivors, and built plantations controlled entirely by the company. This wasn't trade, it was extraction. And it made Amsterdam the financial center of the world. Shares in the VOC were traded on the world's first stock exchange. Dividends flowed. Modern finance was born, powered by nutmeg. England watched closely. The English East India Company copied the model, conquering Bengal, manipulating rulers, minting money, building private armies larger than Britain's own. The company didn't support the empire, it became the engine of empire. Corporate power now extended across continents. But the great spice monopolies created something else: machinery that could be turned toward entirely new commodities. And once built, that machinery only grew. In the 1700s, the world shifted again, this time westward toward sugar. Sugar was the first global addiction, sweet, cheap, endlessly in demand. Large-scale plantations in the Caribbean and Brazil produced it with unprecedented speed. But if sugar was the fuel, forced labor was the engine. Plantation systems became early factories, and European nations fought bitterly over islands not for land, but for monopolies. Sugar created staggering fortunes, reshaping cities like London, Amsterdam, and Bristol. Banks, insurance firms, and port infrastructures were built on its profits. The global financial system was taking shape, anchored in violent, industrial-scale extraction. The Americas quickly became the hinge of the global economy, linking Europe, Africa, and Asia. sugar for Europe, silver from Mexico and Peru for China, tobacco for global consumers. When Alexander Hamilton later pushed for a modern financial system in the United States, he wasn't inventing something new, he was plugging into a network centuries in the making. For all its complexity, the system remained brutally simple. Every empire tried to eliminate the middleman. Venice attempted it. Portugal attempted it. The Dutch perfected it. England scaled it. And the Americas completed the chain, making the world interdependent for the first time. But greater interconnection brought greater volatility. Commodity prices swung violently. Wars erupted over nutmeg groves, sugar mills, and shipping lanes. Nations drowned in debt building fleets and fortifications. Corporations accumulated powers no private entity should have. By the late 1700s, the global economy was no longer steered by governments. Governments were reacting to market forces. That shift created the blueprint of modern capitalism, a world where commodities set the tempo. Corporations shape policy, and distant shocks echo instantly across markets. Today's world operates on the same logic. Whoever controls origins, routes, and information controls the future. If Venice controlled sea lanes, modern giants control data centers. If the VOC monopolized nutmeg, today's tech and logistics giants monopolize software, cloud infrastructure, and supply chains. The tools have changed. The strategy hasn't. The great irony is that the first global economy wasn't built on stability, it was built on friction. The harder a commodity was to obtain, the more valuable it became. Pepper, nutmeg, sugar, their true power wasn't taste, it was leverage. They allowed tiny nations to act like empires and corporations to behave like governments. When we look at today's world, strained supply chains, resource rivalries, rare mineral battles, and digital monopolies, the parallels are unmistakable. Once again, the world is organized around choke points, semiconductor foundries, cobalt mines, cloud servers, satellite networks. And like the spice routes of the past, most are controlled by a small handful of players who understand one timeless truth: access is everything. History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes with startling precision. The first global economy taught us that wealth follows those who master bottlenecks. And whether the commodity is pepper or data, the rule remains the same. Control the path, and you control the world. If this gave you a new perspective, hit subscribe. History has the answers, and I'll show you where to look.